Hello and welcome. Another episode of Steelfur Speaks with, of course, me, Steelfur. Let's get this mic nice and close to my face, fresh off the Krakow casting, where we obviously were casting that. There will be links to that below if you want to take a look at everything we've been doing there. Let's just adjust this camera a little bit so I'm a bit more visible right there. I have lots of notes for this episode. You can see I have my little post-it note here. First things to start off with. Obviously, you'll see a small bit of a change to the channel in that I have my Twitter down below and I have a Patreon also to the right. No followers on Patreon yet. That is perfectly fine. Some people will have known if they've listened to the end of my episode. I have had a coffee page for a while. I still have that. There are a few people on there who maybe will move over to Patreon or still be supported through that. I'll be posting content on both sides for a while, but I did decide to set up a Patreon. I've met a few people who suggested they might want to support my channel, so I wanted to create an easy way for them to do that. I also do have a Discord, which I set up last week. The primary purpose of that Discord is just to have a bit of a chat. Whenever something like FAB 2.0 gets announced, I get messages from lots of different people. And I kind of just wanted to be able to say, well, look, why don't you come into the Discord? And then save myself from having to repeat myself, which I was finding I was doing to quite a few people in a few different locations. This way, it's all in the same place and there can be an active community discussion rather than just me and one person talking one-to-one about my thoughts. Obviously, I do that as well, but, you know, makes things a bit easier. I will also be playing games there. This is going out, I think, on Friday or Thursday evening. I'll be playing games there this Saturday at 7:30 UK time, which is 2:30 Eastern time. With anyone really who wants to come along, I'll just be playing some CC with anyone who really wants to play and just talking about the game and things like that. So if you want to join the Discord, do. It's open to everyone. I don't really believe in siloing it off. I may have to do that at some point if people come in and cause trouble, but we're gonna not create mischief for myself that isn't, if it happens, it happens. Obviously, if you are a supporter on either Patreon or Ko-fi, you will get a special role and a special channel to ask questions to me directly. And there's also going to be a once a month sort of live Q&A about the game, state of the game, various things that have happened with anyone who supports me that wants to just come in and ask me questions about what's going on, what I'm seeing in terms of metas, game development, all those kind of things. So if that's the sort of thing you're interested in, those are channels for you to engage more with me. And really, an opportunity for me to diversify and grow the types of content and the ways that I'm giving content out to people beyond just videos. There's a lot of you don't realize this, but I actually do write for a living. I write reports, analysis. I write a lot of articles and stories. I can write very well. I prefer to do video primarily because this is a side gig, and the last thing you want to do after spending like an entire day writing reports and things like that is come out of that and then turn into making, a written piece of reporting or something on a card game. So I prefer to talk to people and kind of mix things up. But there are days when actually I spend the majority of the day on a call. And at the end of that day, I'd really like nothing else than just to sit down and write. So if you do subscribe to my Ko-fi or my Patreon, you will start to see more written articles when I have a bit more energy and stuff to do that. And I'll take suggestions of topics and things you'd like me to cover in there. And that's perfectly fine. The other, of course, thing just to talk about is that I obviously just got back from Krakow, where I was one of the casters. That was a fantastic experience. And we're going to talk a bit about sort of the meta, I think. Before we start talking about FAB 2.0. Obviously, that's a big announcement for this episode. So, the meta was like 30% Viserai and 10% others. It's really, really skewed towards Viserai at the moment. And the reason for that is simply that Viserai's damage seems to have been designed for CC in mind. But one of the things about Flesh and Blood that makes it quite difficult, and I think a lot of people underestimate the extent to which this affects Blitz, is that the lines are the same. So if a deck can do like a 40 damage explosive turn in CC, it can do that in Blitz as well. The only real question is how much setup does it need? Because if you've got something like Combo Bolton that takes, that takes 6 or 7 turns or 4 turns, however many turns, like 4 or 5 turns to get online, then obviously whether or not it works in Blitz depends on whether or not a Blitz deck that's more aggressive can kill it before that combo goes off. When you're talking at someone like Viserai, who can go from 0 to 30 damage in a single turn, like we saw in the finals of Krakow, then you have a big problem, which is the explosiveness of the CC deck is the same in Blitz, but it just doesn't really have any of the life pool, the life pool survivability that you obviously get from a format with a higher life total. So it's a really big problem, and I think for that reason, we will either see some aggressive bans for Viserai in the next update. But I will also say there is a new sort of potential solution on the horizon. So if we think about Living Legend, and this is kind of important. So Living Legend hasn't really been updated yet in a while, but it has had the points from Krakow added. Let's just get that up here. Okay, so if we scroll on here, now obviously everyone knows where Stavro is right now. We're just looking at him trying to see if he's going to win the calling in Taiwan next week, and then the battle hardened in Taiwan, and there's a few other things going on that could get him Living Legend. I think most people have agreed that that kind of needs to happen. There's a very interesting question which we're going to tackle in a video I'm going to record probably tomorrow, just dealing with the CC meta at the moment for the Steelfur Supremacy playlist, which will look at the meta for CC prior to the bans on May the 2nd. And of course, then if they don't make any changes on May the 2nd, that will be the list that we were going to have to see. But if we look at Blitz, we'll see that after essentially gaining 100 points from winning the calling, as we have it up here, the calling is 100 points, we see that Viserai has shot up to 195 points and overtaken Ira, who was obviously the best for one season, about 3 seasons maybe, and Oldhim, who was pretty good for 2 seasons as well. And we do see that has happened. The one thing I will say, and it has been suggested to me, that not all the points yet from the global skirmishes that happened the same weekend as Krakow, and that are happening, I think, this weekend, I don't think the skirmish season is entirely over, has been added yet. And there is the suggestion that Viserai could potentially get another, say, 50 to 100 points from those, if not more. Someone has suggested that there were about 50 or 60 skirmishes happening this weekend, and if Viserai won them all, he would be on 495 points. Or sorry, 395 points. And then, of course, we have the Battle Hardened coming up as well. So there is a bit of a question hovering at the moment as to where Viserai is going to end up at the end of this season in terms of Living Legend for Blitz. He may actually be gone. And if that's the case, and if it looks like that's going to be the case, then I would support LSS making no changes to Viserai, just letting him be Living Legend. I like Viserai, so I'd be very upset if he went, but I could equally understand, because we're in a position here, and I think this is the point where a lot of people need to pause for a second. So you're LSS, you've designed this system for balancing the game, and we know that, the original, so people said, oh, Living Legend isn't meant for balance. That's not what James White said in his interview. We need to clarify that up. He said that one particular instance, he thought Living Legend wasn't suitable for balance, but the majority of the time, Living Legend is a balancing tool for heroes that are stronger than others for a significant period of the lifespan of the game, and it removes those heroes from the agenda. So it's important to remember that it is a balancing tool. And I think if you've created this tool, right, you really want to get into a position where you're justifying the tool that you created and proving that it works to remove problematic heroes from the metagame. But also, how long is it fair for a hero to have their time in the spotlight before they get banned or adjusted? I think that's a big question people kind of haven't really answered to themselves yet. So Viserai comes in one skirmish season, and because of the power and the number of people who are playing in the world now, the number of skirmishes that are happening, he goes from pretty far down, I think he was down here somewhere, up to first in the space of 2 months. Now, is 2 months too long a time to think that it's fair for a hero to be top of the game, right? How long should an ideal meta last? That's a big question, right? Because the time in between set releases, for Flesh and Blood, they release 3 sets a year, so it's usually about 4 to 5 months, depending on shipping delays. which means that if a hero comes out really strong from a set, then we're looking at a 4 to 5 month meta where that hero is on top of their game, assuming the meta doesn't shift and some other deck that counters that is discovered. And we have seen some decks being somewhat good against Viserai in Blitz, but eventually not winning out because of a certain bit of variance in the format, including Kano and Icelander. But obviously Viserai is more favored, it's one of those things where Kano and Icelander can beat Viserai, but if they play 5 Viserais in a row, they might lose one of those games, which means obviously in a tournament where 30% of the field is Viserai, you might have the Icelander not making the final, not winning, right? Because even if you're favored in a matchup, you're not probably like 80, 90, 100% favored. You might even be 60%, which means you're going to lose that matchup plenty of times as well. So that's important to understand, right? Unless a significant number of people shift to playing that hero that is favored, Viserai doesn't go anywhere. And the reason that Viserai won't go anywhere from the meta is because he is more powerful, more consistent than the other heroes. And part of that is just that due to the addition of very, very good Runeblade cards in in Everfest, he has a much deeper card pool than other people because he's gotten all the cards that were given for Briar, he's gotten all the cards that were given for Chain, and he's finally also got all the cards that were given for Runeblades in Everfest as well. So he's had a lot more sets of cards to add up to. But that power level of Viserai, and the unlikelihood that he is brought back in at this point by anyone else, means that essentially there needs to be a pathway to remove Viserai from the game after a certain amount of time has passed that he is the best hero, for example. And you kind of need to determine and decide what that is. So if we think about Viserai as the best hero, we have to also then look at the 4 months in between set releases and see what is happening from a competitive standpoint, right? Because one of the things I think a lot of people who play this game and other games as well forget is that casual environments, Blitz is a casual environment, don't get confused about that. Casual environments are self-policing, okay? If you have a player that is showing up with Viserai every week to your Blitz armory, winning every single thing, taking all of the promos, making everyone else not want to play or not want to show up, the store owner or the tournament organizer is perfectly entitled to have a conversation with that player and say, hey, can you maybe not bring Viserai this time? Or can you switch it up a bit? Or can you do something to make it more interesting? Or change the format to draft or sealed or something where that Viserai player cannot bring that deck and cannot dominate the format and other players have a chance to breathe and be better, right? They have that possibility. And I will tell you that at my own local armories, when people aren't practicing for something like the calling in Krakow, they are playing decks that are random, fun, enjoyable. I myself have brought random combo decks, Katsu combo decks, like whatever, to an armory because I don't care if I win all the time. Like, my goal for armories literally is to win 1 armory a month, right? I want to win 1 armory a month. I want to get the cold foil promo. And then I'm very, very happy for anyone else to win an armory the rest of the month, right? So if I win once a month, I'm not going to be trying to win that hard for the next 3 weeks, whatever the format is, right? Unless there's a big event coming up, like obviously for the Pro Tour, I'm not taking a crappy deck to my armory because that's bad testing time for me. I may as well just stay at home and test the deck I actually plan on playing with my friends on Tabletop Simulator. So, it's very important that Blitz at a casual level is self-policing. Blitz at a competitive level is a bit difficult, right? Because obviously if the power level is not checked by some sort of ban list or something, you will have people competing to win. And we did see that a bit in the southeast of England, where one player won 4 of the armories with Viserai. 4 of the skirmishes with Viserai. And he did that mostly because he was practicing for Krakow, right? So he wanted to get the reps with the Viserai deck, basically so that he would have the best chance of winning at Krakow. But if Krakow hadn't been happening when it was, the likelihood is he wouldn't have gone to 4 armories. 4 skirmishes, and he wouldn't have done that kind of level of I need to win this, because already we're seeing this, and this is part of the goal between making RTNs and ProQuest's ELO events and making skirmishes stay as XP events, is that a lot of people aren't going to be as keen to go and spike. So spiking is, those of you less familiar, is just bringing the best deck possible to a tournament in the hopes of winning. But it's usually used in terms of bringing a deck that is higher than the power level of the format that you're going to play. So spiking an event is, it's a casual event, but there's a prize you want to win. No one is bringing an optimal deck, but you bring literally this best deck tested ever because you want that prize. So you're going to show up and just beat everyone. And it's usually got negative connotations in terms of people doing it just to get that best prize and not really caring if people don't like them or aren't happy with the solution, like aren't happy or enjoying the games that were played against them. So that's just important to consider. But people are doing this all over the world because Skirmish hasn't yet reached that point where people aren't casual about it. And I think it will at some point. I think we will get to a point. I know certainly I'm only going to one Skirmish because I have to book aside more weekends to practice for the Pro Tour. And therefore, I don't really feel like I want to spend that chunk of my year that accounts for, how much time do I have to play FAB this year? How many weekends? How much money can I spend traveling for FAB this year? I want to put that towards ProQuest and Road to Nationals. I don't want to put that towards skirmishes. I was very happy to make that decision and only go to my local skirmish and not try and win any of the other ones. So I think that's a good place to be in. I think we'll start to see a lot more people making that decision, which is good, which I genuinely think is good, because skirmish then becomes a more self-balancing casual format. But before this skirmish season, we obviously had this problem of Viserai being overpowered. And I will say that, I wasn't going into it on the official cards because obviously I don't want to talk about heroes being overpowered. I want to celebrate the wins of the people who've practiced really hard and come to the tournament, and the guy who won came from America. But I do think Viserai is overpowered for the Blitz format. I do kind of feel like he should have been addressed already. But I do, and this is very important, and this kind of comes back to the CC discussion as well, which is why I'm spending so much time on this in this episode, is that Living Legend exists to remove heroes from the meta and to keep the meta changing and to keep it fresh, right? And that's very important. So the way that Flesh and Blood is made, the meta is only fresh, really, when a new set comes out or when a hero rotates. And even when a new set comes out, it's very hard. Like say we got a new Runeblade in the next set. Now, I don't think we will, but say we did. It would be very, very hard for that Runeblade to compete with Viserai, Briar, Chain, and all the other strong Runeblades that already exist, because those will get access to cards from the new set as well, which they can use to augment their own style. So the only way that these OG heroes get, an advantage or get replaced, is by getting that Living Legend status. And I think LSS knows this, and they don't want to keep banning heroes that are a month away from going away anyway, if that makes sense. So the main reason that you don't touch Stavro at all before the Pro Tour, and whether they will or they won't is up in the air, is that you want Stavro to get Living Legend and go away, right? And that's kind of important. And the same thing for Viserai, right? So if Viserai, remember this is updated on the April the 11th, so if Viserai gets the week 4 skirmishes and gets another 150 points or however many he gets, then we're going to be in a situation where he's only 50 points away from Living Legend. And then if he starts to win sort of the side events, the Battle Hardens and things, he may just find himself Living Legended out of Blitz. And that actually, in my mind, is an ideal situation for LSS, because it creates room for Briar, Chain, and the other aggro decks to come in without Viserai just sitting around as like a neutered version of himself. So kind of like what we saw when Chain had those bans in CC. He's just sitting here on 550 points. He hasn't really gotten any. He hasn't really had any big wins. And that's because people kind of stopped playing him after the ban. So now Chain is still in the game in the same powerful position that he was before. And really all that Chain is waiting for is something that's going to break him again, right? Which isn't really a solution to the negativity of the Chain problem, right? And I classify the Chain problem very simply as, I find personally, I think Chain's hero ability is far, far too much value in a game where most people are only drawing, say, 4 cards a turn. One of the reasons we see Viserai being so strong in Blitz is his ability to draw multiple cards a turn, and that really warps the game in his favor. And the same thing was true of Chain, the ability to draw many cards. I would prefer a game where I don't have to worry about Chain being broken, or make sure I'm always testing Chain whenever a new set comes out that gives him cards, just to see if it breaks him again. I'd much rather if broken heroes were allowed to naturally drift out of the meta, even if that means we have to play with that format for like another 2 or 3 big tournaments, or another week, or another month, or something. I don't think a month of a meta is actually that big of a deal. Right, that makes sense in terms of the lifespan of the game. That'll just be the month where Stavro kicked all of our asses, right? And I think that's important, and that's kind of where I end up on this whole point. Is, would you ban Stavro even if he didn't get the Living Legend points for the Pro Tour? No, I wouldn't. Would you ban Stavro's cards before then? Again, I wouldn't. I would go into that tournament and I would prepare the casters, and I would expect everyone, I'd expect 30 to 40% of the field to show up playing Stavro, and I would just be like, okay, this is a big tournament. Stavro's going to come in and hit it up. But after that, he's gone. Like, after that, he's absolutely gone. And then it's his kind of like his last hurrah. So the first Pro Tour will be when Stavro crushes everyone, but then he's gone and the meta can shift. Now, what the meta looks like after Stavro is gone, that's something that everyone's debating at the moment. And obviously, we can't say for sure what's going to happen until the 2nd of May. But obviously, none of the testing groups, there are lots of testing groups of my own as well. None of them are doing nothing for the next 2 weeks. We're discussing constantly what we think is likely to get banned, what we think is likely to get hit. You're testing different versions of decks where one card is taken out, other cards aren't, to see where the power level is. And then you're asking the question, what beats, X, what beats Y? And that's all fairly standard sort of playtesting practice. But if you're wondering what people are doing in these 2 weeks, it's a lot of talking, but also a lot of games. A lot of how strong is Viserai if they ban Skeleta, how strong is Viserai if they ban X, how strong is Viserai if they ban Y, how strong is, what does the meta look like if you just can't play Stavro, if I don't have to worry about that. There's loads of discussions going on. So that's happening, but I think we've reached a point in the game where enough heroes are getting Living Legend points and getting them fast enough. And I will say that I know it's unpleasant maybe to play in what I might consider to be a broken meta for a month. And that's really the goal of LSS, should be to do more playtesting so that doesn't happen. But I think when it does happen, and there are enough events going on that someone can get Living Legend points, I think it's actually much better for the health of the game in the long term if they're just let to get those Living Legend points. And then we move on to the next hero the next month and see what happens then. I feel like constantly banning things and keeping heroes around, but at a weaker power level, unless they get something broken, is just an unpleasant experience for a lot of people. And I just think it's not really, practical or fun in any sort of meaningful way. So I feel like, I just feel like Living Legend needs to be allowed to happen now. And we need to actually get some movement in terms of what heroes are playable. Because I think if you do let Viserai Living Legend, Blitz becomes very different. We see sort of a bit of a regression towards our Iras, a bit of Lexi coming in, a bit more Oldhim coming in. I think there's going to be a nice bit of a shift. And it might just be that we need to get, 1 or 2 heroes Living Legend in before things start to settle down. But this isn't a computer game. You can't just patch it overnight and expect it to work. You do have to work with the cards that we have. And, it's a lot better to let the system that people were warned about, Living Legend people, because than to do it quickly. And the main reason for that is just in terms of, like, people are getting into this game every week. People are picking up heroes every week. And the Living Legend system lets us telegraph and know, like, about a month or 2 in advance, which heroes are a bit overpowered and going off the game. And that lets us steer new players away from them. Like, if you had a new player who was buying into the game now and they were like, oh, I want to play Stavro, you might be like, mate, why don't I just lend you the cards for a month? And then when he's gone, you can play something else. You might not let them go out and buy that Crown of Seeds, etc. Viserai is a bit different because they might just end up playing Briar, or something like that. But you might still say, look, do you really want to play a Runeblade? If this guy gets banned, do you just like Viserai and not Briar and Chain? If that's the case, then maybe don't do that. There's also a big question in my mind, and we keep talking about the way that this is done, and I kind of just want to finish off this segment talking about Living Legend on this topic. Is just what happens when, um, what happens when a hero gets Living Legend, and I think this is an area where I'd really like LSS to start providing some clarity. I think it's a really big challenge for me as a player who's thinking, okay, someone new wants to invest in the game, or people are trying to move into new heroes, and explain to them that that hero might not be playable anymore. I think we need to know from LSS, and if any of them are listening, you can reply to me directly on this if you want to. I don't really mind. Just Twitter me, whatever. Um, you know, what is the actual plan for replacing heroes when they get Living Legend, right? Is it a case of, only talented heroes get replaced? So, if Viserai goes because we have two other Rune Blades that can play Rune Blade cards, we don't really need to worry about replacing Viserai. You're only losing two specialization cards from the game. The rest of the cards are playable. Is that going to be what happens, right? Or is it important to you to keep every hero playable, including their specialization cards, for the long term, right? That's the first important question I think to ask. So, is it a case of if there are enough people, adult heroes of that class, you won't do anything immediately because there will be another way for that to replace itself, right? You don't need to replace it, sorry, because you have two other heroes of that class who can play the majority of the cards. Or are we in a situation where you want someone like, say, Viserai to always be able to be played in a way that feels like Viserai, e.g. with rune chants rather than Briar and Chain who focus on other things, and you always want a rune chant focused Rune Blade, because otherwise cards like Read the Runes, I'm not going to say Revel because that's always a good card, but otherwise cards like Read the Runes, Oath of the Arknight, all of these things become a bit redundant, right? So do you always want to have a Rune Blade focused, a Rune Chant focused Rune Blade? And what's your time frame then for replacing it? I think this is the main thing. So what several people, I've pitched this, and I think this is the most practical suggestion if they want to immediately make playable replacement for the hero that gets banned, right? Living Legend, as I said, is a very good system because it telegraphs who is getting banned long before they actually get to that stage of the Living Legend, right? So you kind of know a month or two in advance, and it's usually quite predictable. If they don't get banned, they usually do keep climbing. Maybe they slow down a bit when a new set comes out, but they do keep somewhat climbing, as we've kind of seen with Chain and Prism here. They've still got some points this season. They're not as much, obviously, as Stavro, but if Stavro wasn't around, they probably would have got a few more points than they currently have, right? So if your goal is to keep the cards that were playable in one deck playable in another deck, right? That means that you need to replace the hero that goes with a similar but less powerful ability than you had before. Which means, and then it's just a question of speed, right? So I suggested that essentially, if they're worried about losing players because their favorite hero has been banned, so Viserai, for example, favorite hero goes away with Living Legend, then what they're going to do is actually release a print and play version of a new Viserai that you can print and play with as a token, and then just send a load of them out to stores to give away to people who want them, and then put it in the next supplemental set, right? So that you get Viserai in the next supplemental set, and everyone's happy. And I already think we're going to be seeing adult versions of the new Rhinar and Dorinthia in the new supplemental set that's coming at the end of this year. I think one of the reasons that it's a supplemental set is that they want to give us some alternative versions of a lot of different classes. I have a bit more speculation about that, but I essentially think we're reaching a point where they might have expected, because remember the Living Legend system was different before, that some of the heroes like Dorinthia and Rhinar, some of the OG heroes, might have Living Legend already, and we're starting to see the replacement Living Legend versions of those cards, which are being used in the young versions for classic battles, but will be released in the adult versions in the supplemental set at the end of this year. That would be quite a clean solution, which means as well that when we see the next classic battle set come out, it could have our replacement Viserai in, and then we could get the adult version in the set at the end of the year, right? But what you do in the meantime is you just put up a print and play token that people are allowed to print out on a sheet, slide into a sleeve, and take to a tournament. And it does something weaker than Viserai's ability with Rune Chance. Like, it might be. But the thing is, it might even be a very similar ability, but it just says, whenever you play a Rune Blade attack action after you have played a non-attack action, you generate one Rune Chant, right? Which means it's still good on some turns, but not as good on other turns. Or some other variation, right? I'm talking about a slightly depowered version of what currently exists. Or they might go crazy and do something completely new and random, but that's the less safe option, because if people don't like it, you're not adding something that people will find useful to the game. You're adding something different and hoping that the players who currently have all those cards enjoy that new archetype. I'm kind of fine with either, but I do want transparency on their plans, because, for example, if they come out and clarify that the second that Viserai hits Living Legend, for example, or Starver hits Living Legend, they will be releasing a print-and-play hero that can continue to play all of Viserai's cards, then I have no qualms saying to a new player, invest in Viserai. You like him. He's not going to go anywhere. There'll be a new version if this one goes away. And just saying, carry on, have fun, right? Even if he's not as strong, power is not what I'm telling new players to take heroes up based on, right? If you're a super competitive player, you're going to be asking me what's the top tier hero. If I say Viserai right now, I'll say it with a caveat, but he might get changed in 2 months. And as a competitive player who's got experience with card games, you're going to say, okay, I'm going to take that risk because this big tournament's coming up, or I'm not going to take that risk because there's no big tournaments to play him in. I'll just wait and see what the meta is like then. And you'll make different decisions. But if you're a new player, it doesn't matter to you whether the hero is the strongest in the game anymore. It just matters to you whether the hero is playable. That's why I think this is a great area that LSS should start to give clarity on as soon as possible, which is what is their plans for when these heroes actually hit Living Legend. Are we going to get a new Elemental Bravo as a token that we can play in the meantime with a depowered ability? Are we just going to be forced to play old Bravo instead because he can play all the same cards except the elemental ones? And is the same true then of someone like Viserai? Because obviously Bravo, Star of the Show, can play all of Bravo's specialization, so none of those cards are unplayable. But the same is not true of Viserai and Become the Arc Knight, and Arc Knight Ascendancy will not be playable until there is a new version of Viserai as a specific card. And I think it would just be a good to understand. I think this is my last just sort of comment, is just for LSS to tell us their plans on that. Are people going to have to wait to get a new Viserai that they can play? Because that does have a big impact on not only new players, but people who have a favorite hero like Viserai, who just want to go to a local armory and play Viserai, and they're not really so, like, as a casual person, you don't really care so much about the power level, you just care about having those cards playable. So that would be a really good place to get some clarity on from the game. But otherwise, Living Legend, I think, is a really good idea. So we're going to talk just a bit now. Let's go and talk just a little bit about FAB 2.0. There's obviously been hundreds of articles already on FAB 2.0, and I think it's kind of just, worth addressing for a minute. Because I have my own 2 cents really on the whole thing, as of course you would expect, given you all know how talkative I am at this point. So obviously, let's start off with the, just the overall takeaways on the article. This article was fantastic. There were very few things in this I actually disagreed with. I think this is a really good article. There were 1 or 2 areas where I don't think it went nearly far enough. But I have to say, I think this is brilliant. So on Retiring First and Unlimited, it's amazing. It's perfect. The boxes and stuff are still going to be worth something. They're still not going to print an unlimited amount of this set or any set. And much like we see with Magic, as the player base grows and as the time goes by, anyone who's buying these boxes as an investment will probably get rewarded in some way, because the sets do go up in value as time goes by, as new players join the game. You can't really escape from the fact that, especially if something is a draft set as well, right? People are always going to want to draft it, even for nostalgia. Like, if we buy a load of Uprising and I put a case or 2 cases in my cupboard, I have a case of most of the sets that have come out while I've been playing, not any alpha or or Arcane Rising or Crucible, but once I started playing the game and started being able to buy boxes at retail, I have started putting a case aside. And if I find a draft set really, really fun, I'm going to do what I did with draft sets before. I'm going to take a case of it, I'm going to put it in my shelf, and then in 5 or 6 years time, I'm going to call up my mates and be like, hey, do you want to do a draft of this set? We haven't drafted it in years. I think it'll be really fun, and we'll go and we'll draft it. It'll be really great. So the fact is that these sets are always going to be worth something in the long term. So people could still buy them as an investment. It will still keep those cards going off the shelf. But the main thing is that sorry, let's not swear. I was about to swear there. As people will know, I don't like swearing on my stream. Partly because you may not know this, but YouTube allows you to F bombs or swear words on your stream before you get the video demonetized. But I just don't like swearing. So I will say that, like, who really cares, right? Even if this box doesn't go up in value at all. Now, it will, because you have principles of arbitrage. If it's a draft set, people are going to be drafting that set, opening boxes and drafting it for like 6 months. The number of boxes that are unopened and not drafted with will always go down. But who cares? As long as there is enough product without the FUD and the confusion that we've seen around the first edition launches of Monarch and Aria and all these other things, where stores could be like, oh, I'm going to get heavily allocated, therefore this box is worth $600, where Channel Fireball, could do their thing of putting up the prices because maybe they thought they were going to get allocated, who really knows the details, and pushing the price up super high. Like, who cares? If that can't happen now, because, 200, 300, 400, however many thousand boxes we need are going to be printed every set, and people are just going to get this set on the first day and they're going to open it. Now, I will say there are some negatives, because of course the new set removes the split between between first and unlimited, which means both cone foil and rainbow foil equipments come in the same box, which means I, who have quite enjoyed collecting cold foil equipment sets from sets that came out while I was playing, by buying a load of first edition at retail, will not be able to do that because 3 times rarer for cold foils. So I'm not going to get as many cold foil legendaries. I'm going to have to work harder in terms of buying singles and trading to get the cold foil legendaries I need for those favorite heroes I want. Like if they put out a druid, I'm just going to trade my left arm for all the cold foil heroes for a full set. But I do firmly believe it will be doable. I do firmly believe that I, as an average player who's not a big whale, but who does spend a decent chunk of money every set to get a full playset of all the cards, I do think that I will be able to trade and buy my way into some of the cold foils that I want to complete the set that I'm interested in, right? And I'm not going to go all the way. Like, I don't have a cold foil Fable from Everfest because I'm just not that interested in it. I don't think it's a good card. I'm just not that keen, so I just didn't get one. And I much preferred the cold foil locations, landmarks that I do to the gems. I know I'm a horrible sacrilegious person, and lots of people disagree with me. But let's just say that that's fine. So for a person who wants to collect a full set of legendary cold foils, it becomes more difficult, right? But for every single other metric, this is the best way to do it. The product is not going to have to be bought at pre-orders in massive numbers because you're afraid of it being allocated. It is going to be able to sit on the shelves for a few months, which means new players can come in and buy it. People can have it for draft. People are going to be drafting. Like, imagine this. 3 months after the set comes out, you go into your local store for your draft night, 1 draft night a month, 2 draft nights a month. You crack open your boosters and you pull a cold foil Fabled, right? 3 months after the set comes out. How good is that going to feel? Especially because that cold foil Fabled is 3 times rarer than it is now, right? So it could be worth, like, pay off your draft for a month. It could do so many things for you, right? How good is that going to feel? This set is genuinely going to feel amazing to open, right? Absolutely amazing to open. And it's got this whole new Marvel legendary, and they keep talking about making really interesting stuff to put in, and I hope that it's not just these EAs, because I'm actually quite negative on the EA like Aether Wildfire and things like that, because I feel like the text box is just not transparent enough. I really think they just need to go full hog and make it like a full EA. But also, there's nothing really interesting happening in the art at the bottom. I think the only good one that I liked was Knick Knack Bric-a-Brac. And that's just because if you look at it, his cat is in the photo at the bottom. And the artist has added in his cat there at the bottom. So it's kind of like, it's kind of just like a cute addition to the photo that you couldn't get from somewhere else. And you can't see it on the regular full art. So I think that's pretty good. But aside from that, like, they need to add, if you're going to make these EA cards, you need to add like Easter eggs underneath the art in there just to make them more interesting than just seeing someone's feet. Because that's the problem with stuff like Eighth of Wildfire, is you just see someone else's feet. So I think this is really, really good, right? Okay, I think it's just fantastic. Okay, and cold foils aren't getting reprinted, that's not changed. What is happening, of course, is this historic, right? And the history packs are actually really, really good. Second. So this is really, really good. Now, I think it's important to understand a few things. So, firstly, this set is white bordered. I think these look pretty good myself. I know some people don't like them. That's fine. Each to their own. I jokingly did a white bordered card here for a YouTube short that I was doing. Where's it gone? I had a white bordered belittle here just as a laugh. I can't find it. Anyway, there's a few things that strike me as interesting as this, and I know some people, may not have followed the news as closely as I am, but LSS have said that this product is not going to be like mass printed in English. I think that's kind of important to acknowledge. Like, it's not going to be a product. They don't expect people to buy cases and cases of this. It's kind of designed, and I've kind of got this impression as well in terms of the pre-orders that I've seen happening in and around my area, is that a lot of established players are buying one box of this just to open, have a bit of fun with. They're not buying like the cases they would have bought of, a new set or something like that. They just want to open it. They just want to see what it's like. And I think that's really important just to acknowledge. So that the pre-orders for this are going to be a lot less than, say, we get from, a new set. And part of that is by design. Like, if you're looking at this as an established player who's got lots of cards, and you're saying, this isn't for me, then you're absolutely right. This isn't for you. The goal of this set is very much to sit on the shelf. And that sounds bad, because I know game stores don't want products sitting on the shelf. And people don't really want... people don't really want the idea that this product is going to sit on the shelf. They don't want a product that is going to, flop and people aren't going to mass buy it. But actually, the goal of this product is to sit on the shelf, right? Because you have to remember that on the 25th of May, we have our first proper, like, deluxe starter product coming out, the heroes of which feature in this set, right? So if you have your classic battles and you get it off the shelf and you want warrior cards... Assumedly, if they're sold out of WTR and shops are slowly selling out of WTR, then you are not going to be able to buy that. You need to buy this history pack, and you're going to get these history packs, and it's going to show you some of the other classes that you could try out as well, and give you the tools for playing, like Runeblade maybe, and give you a chance at some of these legendaries. So I think it's really good that this pack is not one that's going to sell out straight away. Hopefully it does. Every store has a couple of boxes or a couple of cases sitting on a shelf for players to buy packs from when they're picking up their new starter packs. And I know that we're going to run a new player event with those new player starter pit packs as well, which is going to be kind of fun. So I think that's kind of important, because no one that you speak to thinks that this classic Battles Reinhardt versus Dorinthia set is the only one that's being done this year, right? People know that they're going to do more of these. We're going to have Reinhardt versus Dorinthia. We might have Katsu versus Bravo, but I'd be kind of surprised on that, because I don't think that's a really fun out-of-the-box experience. But I think we might see a Viserai versus, someone else, maybe, as kind of like an alternative. Maybe a Viserai versus Azalea as a chance to get a new Azalea into the, the set. So to give... Azalea a new lease on life with a new hero ability. We could see that coming out this year. And this product will cover all of those people. And remember as well that this is the only history set we're getting And it's very important to understand this. This is the only history set we're getting until 2024. So the next history set, the one that has Monarch, Tails, and Everfest in, is not going to come out until 2024. So for the next 2 years, new players will have a choice between buying some boosters of this historic set to get the cards they need, or buying boosters of the new sets as they come out, like Uprising and the latest set coming out this year. That will be the new player entry pathway into the game. And in that context, it is good to have this available. The other thing I will say is, I have a feeling this is going to be a really fun set for Shapeshifter. And we're already kind of talking about doing a release event, which will be a Shapeshifter set, where you get 6 boosters and you have to build any deck you want. That could be really fun with these boosters that have cards from all of these sets. That'll be really exciting to see and really exciting to ask questions about, is what people are going to be doing and whether we're going to enjoy that. It's also worth understanding that with the addition of these coming out in other countries, so French, German, Italian, Spanish, there will be a lot more singles available on the market. And traditionally, singles in foreign languages have been cheaper from a UK perspective. So a lot of the people may find that actually buying card market, Italian and French and German singles may actually be very easily accessible for them. And just the number of cards available in the world to play with goes up as well with the addition of these. So you may find a very robust singles market for old cards is also a solution to new players, right? Because none of the like some of the Crucible and WTR Majestics are starting to go up in price now. And you have a question as to how much should a class Majestic cost? Maybe like a $5, a $10, depending on how good it is. And obviously you've got CNC and E-Strike and the outliers there, which obviously need a reprint. But as long as the price of singles stays around the, £2 to £10 mark for Majestics, then actually the singles market can handle the demand for new players on these cards. And when it can't, people will crack more history packs and get more of those Majestics and sell them. Remember as well that the Majestic drop rate, because they've got rid of the super rare rarity, is going to be much, much higher in these packs as well compared to the traditional the traditional WTR Arc and Crucible, which had fairly low Majestic drop rates, right? Crucible, the exception, but the first 2 sets definitely did. And remember that History Pack 2 is coming out soon in these foreign languages as well, which will further impact the singles market in terms of cards availability. So this is very much a play by LSS to account for the fact that new players are going to be joining the game and they need something to buy and open because opening packs is fun, and they have to have something that gives them access to older cards that are now out of print. And if you're saying, I don't want to buy one, that means this product is bad, you don't want to buy one, and that's why the product is good. The product is good because it hasn't got any stupid chase, extended arts, or anything like that in that's like really desirable to an existing player, which means it flies off the shelves. The product is good because it will stay available for a long time and therefore be available to new players for a long time. And that is very, very important. Also, in the 2.0, we're really happy to see more talk about investing in lore. I love the lore and the stories and all these other kind of things. I love the Classic Battles set. It just sounds like it's going to be a really good thing. I have certain worries about it, namely that they have put one of those Majestics in there. And if they release Classic Battles without a roadmap for when those Majestics become legal in Classic Constructed, and also a roadmap for when those Majestics are being printed, then there are really big mistakes going on there. So, for example, if those Majestics come out in this set, they're not available in a supplemental set until the end of this year, then we actually have a really serious problem, because I know Rhinar and Dorinthia players who will buy 3 of them and split the Majestics between them, and will use that to put in their competitive CC deck, and there will quickly be no Classic Battles available on the shelves for new players to buy, right? And that completely defeats the purpose of it, as it's supposed to be a premium product that sits on the shelf with an LGS and catches the eye of card game players who are walking by, say, hey, what is that? and then they split it with a friend, and it's supposed to be really fun out of the box experience. But also, but to do that, it has to be on the shelf to catch the eye. And I tell you, if they have only put one of these Majestics in there, then they're setting up a situation where experienced players will buy more than one of these packs. That is a real shame. Whether or not even it's included in the deck, you would really love to see you get two of the Majestic because it's a Blitz deck in the deck, and you get a pack that has one of the Majestic just tacked on the side, or one of every new card that isn't being released in another set included in that pack as well, just so a new player doesn't feel bad or have to buy a second one to get a playset of the cards to play Classic Constructed. I think that's really important, and I think they need to learn the lesson of, say, Android Netrunner and all those LCGs that used to print core sets with one of or two of certain special cards, and then someone would have to buy 3 core sets just to get a playset of all the cards. That feels really bad, and if we've got that with Classic Battles, then I actually feel like we have a pretty serious problem. And I'll go far. I'll say if we have that with Classic Battles, then we have a fundamental flaw in the product design that needs to be addressed before the next Classic Battles comes out, or the product is just going to be a failure. And not a failure in terms of sales, I think that's important to classify, but a failure in terms of doing what it was designed to do, and in selling to new players, right? So really your ideal is that anyone who plays Rhino or Dorinthia as an existing player buys one of these, but that new players have them on the shelves to buy as well. So if it's not doing that, then it's very much failing at its purpose. Otherwise, we see a confirmation that PvE is coming, but obviously, it's going to take them a while to build a new PvE system. I really look forward to that. We see changes to the UPF rules. I think, and we see Commoner add as an additional format. I will say that I have identified, and this is kind of like the last main segment. We're going to talk about ELO just a small bit more, but it's kind of the last main segment before we wrap up on the 2.0 announcement. It's just to say that there is a problem in this game in a lot of environments where Blitz is no longer casual enough for new player entry and retention. Okay, at my local store, I noticed this quite a lot. When we're playing Blitz, everyone I know has full legendaries for their class because it's their favorite class. They've tried to build the best deck they can to win that tournament this weekend. And even if they're playing a meme deck, it's still not what a new player would consider a meme deck, or someone would still be able to beat if they were using a Blitz starter, or even compete against if they were using a slightly upgraded Blitz starter or something like that. And I do get it. You get the cards, you get the good cards, you want to make your deck better, you want to be able to have a fun experience playing the best cards you can, the best deck you can, but you have to acknowledge that that is not a new player friendly experience, because they shouldn't have to spend that much money to keep up. They shouldn't have to spend that much money to even be competitive. And not everyone wants to come in to 3 rounds of Swiss on a Wednesday night and lose 3 games in a row because everyone has the legendaries and the shiny cards, right? That's very, very important. Not everyone wants to do that. And we've had a lot of requests for, is there a casual night, etc., etc., especially with the rise of stuff like Commander and Magic as the default format. One of the reasons for that is that you don't have to arrive at a Commander event at a specific time. People have very busy lives, so you don't have to arrive at 7:30 on the dot to play in a tournament. You can just rock up and find a table when you're there, or text ahead and maybe there's other people that arrive at the same time as you. And that's actually become really important to a lot of people who are playing card games casually, and don't want to get super invested, is that they can show up and just play some games. So what we're doing as a store is we're playing some Chaff Goblin. We're making plans to put some Chaff Goblin into our rotation. I'm probably going to end up running a UPF weekend event, and we're going to start to do Commoner once a month. And, I know from the very, very start that my more competitive players are not going to enjoy playing Commoner once a month. And I may have a fall off in attendance that week. But the ability for me to say to a new player who's interested in trying Flesh and Blood, why don't you come out down on Commoner night when we're playing with this sort of list and this easier format? Everyone's playing with common cards. It's super easy to get in, and they'll come. It's just much an easier proposition, and I might even make a rule that if you're coming to Commoner, you can just bring a Blitz starter deck with no changes, and I won't care how many rares are in it, etc., etc. Right? Because there are not very many rares in those decks anyway, and I might just make that rule because you're playing with a starter deck, and then I'm just not going to care about it, right? So I think this is very important acknowledgement, and I'm really happy to see just you know just making more space for casual play in the game, so that people get in. Because remember that not everyone is competitive. This game, to survive and thrive, needs to appeal to a casual player base who are going to show up and have fun every week, not just to win. Um, and, for example, I could easily see myself running PvE once or twice a month when it comes out, and getting a lot of people coming in and trying the competitive version of the game after playing PvE. And I could really see that as being a thorough pathway to the game. And the same for UPF and Commoner once they get off the ground. I can see someone coming to a Commoner event as their first event with a Commoner deck, enjoying the game very, very cheaply, and then turning around and saying, okay, awesome, I would like to play more of this. Right? And it's really important. So, just the other few things. I'm not really going to comment much on the Living Legend tied to hero thing. I think this is kind of a misstep. I think that the heroes and the weapons are suitably distinct. That, like, for example, ninjas with Kodachis will always be good even without Katsu. I don't really think it makes a lot of sense to take the weapons with them. I will say that there are some times where the hero isn't the problem, the weapon is, and I think that might be the case with someone like Dorinthia, where Dawnblade is very strong, but Dorinthia is a bit clunky, especially for new players. Where if these got Living Legend together, I wouldn't mind. But I think I would much prefer if it was done on a case-by-case basis rather than just saying every time a hero goes, they take their weapon with them. I can't really imagine ninjas at the moment without Kodachi. So, like, if Katsu got Living Legend, which he won't, it would feel really bad. It's kind of like a double blow to a class that's just had their hero removed. So I'm not really sure how I enjoy it. I will say, however, assuming that they're printing replacements, this is a very, very good way to completely change the feel of a hero after they have been changed. So it's not just a new type of Katsu with the Kodachis, or a new type of Viserai without Nebula Blade. It will change the way the hero plays drastically. So, that is, I think, kind of important to acknowledge that it might actually be better for Living Legend because it will change the environment a lot more. But equally, I kind of like the idea of just keeping weapons around. I also like the addition of suspension instead of bannings for the restricted list. I think it's a lot softer to tell people that a class or a card they like is suspended than it is to ban that card. I think it's going to make people a lot more comfortable in terms of hearing that the card is only gone for a month, and maybe it gets gone completely when they realize the game is more fun when it's gone. But at least if it's only gone for a month, you can kind of make your decisions based on that. It is also, I think, really good that they have moved ELO down to include Battle Hardens, Road to Nationals, and Pro Quests. I feel like these are where the competitive players are going. And if there is ELO on the line, they're going to show up to more of them and probably not show up to as many skirmishes and let those be a bit more casual. So I think it's very, very important to enable that and to give these. And I mean, if you want to quickly, because remember, XP for Pro Tours and XP in general is a really risky system. And I think if they wanted to quickly, and people are kind of speculating about this because it seems like they've changed all of the RTNs and ProQuest events on our gems to be rated events now, but not have any rating currently applied for them. People are currently speculating that they will maybe apply this retrospectively so that they can use ELO for the France ProQuest in a way that they haven't done for New Jersey. And I think that would actually be really hype because I think the experience grind is a bit grim and I kind of want it gone straight away. But also one thing I'm kind of annoyed, maybe sad they didn't acknowledge in here is just like acknowledge the danger of the experience grind and how sort of toxic that is, and also address the fact that you can grind XP in events that happen outside your country or happen online. I really personally would remove experience for online armories now that COVID is starting to wrap up in some countries. Where it's still there, leave it in. But you know, the fact is that you shouldn't be able to play in like 7 online events a week and grind XP that affects nationals and pro tour attendance, because it just raises the bar on what is expected from your dedicated but maybe not, you know, it takes a lot of time and energy to play that many tournaments, and it's kind of like an unreasonable expectation for someone to play in like a national championship to have to grind 5 armories a week in Singapore, for example. That seems like it's a bit of a stretch for that person in the UK to have to do. So I was a bit disappointed they didn't address the problems with XP in this FAB 2.0 announcement. I really would have liked to see some sort of decision that XP earned outside your country doesn't count, or XP earned online doesn't count, something like that. I think it would be fine to restrict it so that it's only XP from within your country, and then people in Singapore can have stupid amounts of experience, but people elsewhere, won't. But I can also see them just removing XP from online armories completely. That once COVID starts to wrap up in other countries, and just basically have the goal of, your nationals XP is what you earn playing in person at your local game store. And if you can go to more local game stores, then great, good for you. Otherwise, just make do with what you do. Yeah, the only other thing, of course, is just to acknowledge the quick change to LO, that it's going to be seasonal based instead of event based. I think a lot of people missed this. So what they're saying is that rather than you getting like 100 per calling, 200 per nats, etc., it's actually just going to be like, here's the national season. We want to give out 600 points in the national season. And then if a hero wins like 50% of nationals, they get 300 points, and then you break up the rest based on the win percentage of those. And what that does is stop what has happened to Stavro this season, where the living legend hero goes from 0 to 1,000 in like 2 months. They don't want that to happen again. So they're going to be like, well, you can only get 800 points. And if, Stavro wins everything, then he gets 800. Or maybe there's 1,000 points up for grabs. And then if Stavro wins everything, he gets living legend. But if he doesn't win everything, he doesn't, right? And maybe they're going to break it down that way. We'll have to see how this kind of works out. But I think that's just important to acknowledge. And that's all I really have to say about FAB 2.0. So we've covered a lot of ground this episode. Thanks for listening this far. Obviously, if you've listened as far, as I always say, if you listen to me talk for an hour, then you definitely should like and subscribe on YouTube. Consider joining my Patreon, because you have clearly listened to me for a very long time, and you clearly enjoy hearing what I have to say and enjoy hearing the details, that I go into, and you want to talk to me more. There are places you can do that. So, that's a consideration for you as well. That is, of course, Steelfur Speaks on Patreon. Consider following me on Twitter at Steelfur Speaks, where I publish updates of all my videos so that you can keep up to date with the latest things without logging on to YouTube. And this is also available in podcast form, as I have becoming a lot better at uploading my episodes to podcast. It is primarily just the Steelfur Speaks main episodes, so nothing about the meta or the weird other side episodes I do. But if you'd like to hear this just in a podcast form, you can go and subscribe. I think it's available on iTunes, Spotify, and some about 3 or 4 other platforms. So if you want to subscribe on that, you can, and that would be really good. And that's it, really. Otherwise, have a great week, and obviously we'll come back to you when there's another significant update, or next week if it makes sense, with another episode of Steelfur Speaks. As always, I have been Steelfur. Have a great week.